With us now is Paul Sullivan from Veterans for Common Sense. Mr. Sullivan, welcome to In Their Boots, and thanks for being a part of the show today.
Thank you for having me.
And right off the bat, do you think most Americans, Paul, understand the numbers of suicides that we're experiencing in the military today?
No, unfortunately, most of America doesn't know that there's a suicide epidemic among our returning Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans, as well as just a general epidemic of suicides among all veterans. It's a very serious problem, and we here at Veterans for Common Sense are trying to raise awareness about it so that we can try to reduce the number of suicides.
What do you think it is that's causing these numbers to rise so drastically?
The number one reason that suicides are going up is because of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Let's be very, very direct about it. The second cause is the number of repeated deployments to the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. There was an Army study that came out a couple of years ago, and it showed that deployment to the Iraq and Afghanistan battle zones twice or more increased the likelihood of returning home with a mental health condition by 50%. And now the third reason we're seeing a rise in suicides is untreated mental health conditions. What you have is a tidal wave of patients returning home from the war in Iraq and Afghanistan at a time where the American Psychological Association says that 40% of the military mental health positions are vacant. So imagine a worst case scenario, a tidal wave of demand of new war patients and a shortage of mental health professionals. We here at Veterans for Common Sense are trying to turn that around. We want Congress to give more money to the Department of Veterans Affairs and VA so they can hire the right kinds of mental health professionals so that veterans can get care sooner rather than later, especially when there's a suicide that's possible.
What are you doing for families that have lost their loved one?
Well, here's what Veterans for Common Sense does. We focus on raising public awareness through publicity of service members and veterans' concerns, and we work with Congress, senators, and representatives to see that they have the right policies and the right amount of money to make sure veterans receive what they earned quickly. For example, when we found out that suicidal veterans were being turned away from VA hospitals, Veterans for Common Sense sued the Department of Veterans Affairs. It set up a toll-free suicide prevention hotline. And in the first 15 months of that hotline, it was set up in the beginning of August 2007, more than 83,000 people have called the toll-free suicide prevention hotline. Out of all those calls, more than 2,100 veterans had their lives saved. That means that the Department of Veterans Affairs dispatched emergency response vehicles like an ambulance to go bring that veteran in and give them care. And I'm certain on top of that, there are thousands more veterans who have been referred for mental health care so that they can begin treatment right away and possibly avoid spinning downward into a cycle of depression and then suicide.
Are there differences in the numbers that are reported in the actual numbers of suicides that we're seeing today?
Unfortunately, there are. In 1997, the Department of Veterans Affairs intentionally and knowingly misled CBS News. The Department of Veterans Affairs told CBS News that there was a total of about 800 suicide attempts among veterans receiving care from VA each year. However, when Veterans for Common Sense sued the Department of Veterans Affairs, VA was forced to admit that the number was closer to 12,000 suicide attempts per year among veterans under VA care. That means that the official suicide attempt count was 15 times higher, and VA only released that information because they had to testify about it in court. And here's the bottom line. Among veterans aged 18 to 24, they are about 3 to 4 times more likely to complete a suicide than non-veterans of the same age.
Wow.
The numbers are very serious. So what's our message? Our message is that if there's any veterans or family members out there who think they might need some assistance, a good place to go is the Department of Veterans Affairs. So their website's easy, www.va.gov. And furthermore, what we want to do is also put VA on notice that when our veterans show up, don't turn them away.
Yeah.
And our message to the bigger public is, you know what? Veterans with PTSD are just like everybody else. And, they can be given care and they can work toward recovery and they don't need to be discriminated against.
Well, Paul, thank you for your time here on the show today and the advocate that your group has been for veterans in setting right the system. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks.
Take care. And remember, if you or someone you know is suffering from severe post-traumatic stress or experiencing any of the symptoms we talked here today about suicidal thoughts, please don't hesitate to contact the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Next week, we'll be airing our holiday special, where you'll meet an amazing mother who found the strength to give back after losing her only child in Iraq. Here it is now, a preview of Jacob's Light.
Jacob was killed November 14th of 2003. When Jacob died, people wanted to make donations to different organizations in his name. And I said, pack up boxes and ship them out to the troops. That would mean something. To my son, it would mean so much. Between 9,000 and 10,000 pounds will be boxed by volunteers and set aside, and tomorrow they'll be picked up, brought to the post office, and sent to our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. On Tuesday night will be 5 years to the date from when I sent my first box over to Iraq. I had no idea we were going to grow into Jacob's Light Foundation, but it's 5 years, and it's also my son's 34th birthday.
Thanks for being here today. We'll see you back here next week for another episode. Until then, take care.
Well, this is basically the way that Jeff's room was, not as crowded. And this is the platoon picture, which was downstairs. He took a couple of pictures from this room, put it downstairs, but you can see over here the blood that he shed that day. And then this is a history of Jeff at all different ages. As you can see, he was a clown. He has the fisherman's net over his sister's head. But it just summed up his life. And
everything's buried with him now. Everything's buried. All his hopes, all his dreams, all our hopes and dreams, all our future. Grandchildren, it's all buried.